Cavin Elizabeth, a wedding photographer based in San Diego, and today I'm going to be talking about whether or not you need a second photographer for your wedding. A second photographer, also known as a second shooter, is an additional photographer that is there on your wedding day and is subcontracted by the main photographer. So the main photographer hires out another photographer from a different company, or maybe they actually work with their company full-time or just part-time, but they basically are borrowing another photographer for your wedding day. They are the ones who are responsible for choosing that photographer, so typically you do not get to choose who it is. They choose them based on who they know they need for that day, so leave it up to them. Trust them to choose the right person for the job. They know who they need. They know who the best person for your wedding day is going to be. And usually a second photographer is going to cost anywhere from maybe a low couple hundred, maybe $200, up to maybe $1,000. If you've got a really super fancy photographer, it could be over $1,000. But I would say on average a couple $100 for the full wedding day, something like that. So it never hurts to have a second photographer. If you're on the fence, I say go for it. I'm going to illustrate the benefits of a second photographer in this video, but bottom line, I would say go for it if you can. It really never hurts to have one. It's better to have one than to not have one. Professionally speaking, that is my opinion. I would say it's a really good idea just to have one. So I'm going to really illustrate the benefits of having a second photographer by explaining to you guys what I do as the main photographer on the wedding day and what my second photographer does. Now, as a human being, I cannot be in two places at once, and there's a lot of things happening on the wedding day, often multiple events happening at the same time, and I simply cannot capture those different events happening in two different places at one time. So that's where a second photographer comes in handy. So on a wedding day, I show up and I go to the bride's room. So if it's bride and groom, I'm in the bride's room, and then the groom is off doing his own thing in a separate room. And then usually the bride is doing hair and makeup, all those things, and I am photographing her details like her shoes, the invitation suite, and then when I'm done with that, I'm photographing the bride getting into her dress. So usually there's not a lot of time for me to just go on over to the groom's room unless they really extend my coverage, give me more hours and more time in the morning for me to actually take the time that is necessary to properly photograph the groom or maybe another bride. Another bride would take a lot longer because the bride has a lot more stuff getting ready than a groom does. A groom is really short, there's no hair and makeup, things like that usually, and so it would take a lot more time. But it takes a lot of time to go really do the proper getting ready type photos that you need, so I really can't go over there unless I have way more getting ready time in the morning. So I'm usually with the bride, and then after the bride, usually there's the first look, and so I would meet up, if I had a second shooter, I would meet up with the second shooter and we would be photographing different angles of the first look. And then after the first look, we would be doing portraits, so getting different angles. During the wedding party portraits, which would usually be next, the second shooter is usually getting different angles, or if we're kind of on a time crunch, I might be doing, let's say, all the bride and the bridesmaid pictures together, and maybe in a little different spot, the second shooter is photographing the groom and the groomsmen together in a different spot. So that could be really helpful for me to get two different types of group portraits done at the same time. Sometimes I will do them all myself, but sometimes I will just have my second shooter do them at the same time, especially if the groups are larger and we need to really knock it out very quickly, especially if things are running late, which on wedding days they often do. And then normally it's family photos next. I do all the family photos myself, and my second shooter will do different candid angles from the side, or maybe there's little groups off to the side and they're getting different pictures of that, which is really great. So two different things happening at the same time that I can't capture myself because I'm focusing on one event at a time. For the ceremony, it is really nice to have that second photographer because if I was by myself, I would only be able to really get one angle of the ceremony unless I'm able to run around as fast as I can from the front to the back, but that's a little distracting to be running, like literally running. Especially if it's a longer aisle, I can't get around because normally I'm placed at the very front of the aisle, kind of discreetly behind the arch. If I can be, I'm kind of next to the officiant so that I can get the bride walking up the aisle. Normally I can kind of click the groom's face or the bride's face if it's a bride at the front. So that's what I do, and then I will walk around to the side, get the handoff, usually of the father of the bride to the groom. And then my second photographer would be getting the back. So the entrance of the bride from the back is a really beautiful shot to have. So then different angles of the ceremony as it's happening, just helping me capture all of the different things that are going on during the ceremony is really lovely to have. And then this is really key. So after the ceremony, cocktail hour is going on. And so if there was a first look, usually I don't have any more group portraits to do unless we didn't finish them all or there's extended family. So what I normally am doing if there was a first look during cocktail hour is I am focusing on the reception details. My clients invest a lot of money and time into their reception details, so I make sure that I spend a lot of time photographing them as perfectly as possible. So that's what I am normally doing during cocktail hour, and my second photographer is at cocktail hour itself, photographing the details there and all of the people. So they're getting candid pictures and post pictures of all of the guests at cocktail hour. So I can't be in two places at once, and I don't want to stretch myself too thin during that time. So that is what is happening during those moments, which is really crucial to have all of that guest coverage just so nice. I wouldn't be able to get as much if I was dedicating myself to the reception details and then scrambling to get all of the remaining guests during the little time I have left after reception details. And then also usually I'm trying to maybe fit some sunset portraits in the remaining time of cocktail hour after I'm done with the reception details. So it's really nice that my second photographer was there for a lot of cocktail hour to get all that guest coverage and those cocktail hour details. And then during the reception, it's so nice to have a second shooter capturing different angles of all of the reception events, especially a lot of times it happens where maybe I don't like my angle as much and I like their angle better, or vice versa. Having two different angles sometimes is really nice because one angle is a lot better than the other, or maybe one angle is just slightly better, but having those options is really nice to have because I can pick and choose which ones to include, or maybe I just include both and the couple really has the choice which ones they're gonna print or which ones they're gonna include in the album. So it's really nice to have that. Sometimes one of us is just in a better place than the other, and that's the way it works out. So that's pretty much the wedding day. Kind of to rewind a little bit, if there was a wedding that did not have a first look, then what would have happened during cocktail hour is I would actually be focusing on all of those bridal party portraits, all of the family photos, and then all of the couples portraits while my second shooter was at cocktail hour, and my second shooter would also be responsible for getting the reception details. So they would be doing both of those things while I am doing all of the formal portraits for the entirety of cocktail hour, because if you do not do a first look, you are going to be spending pretty much every waking minute of cocktail hour doing posed portraits, because that's all the time that you have for portraits is cocktail hour. You won't probably get to enjoy any of your cocktail hour with your guest unless you had a really long cocktail hour. So that's what's going to be happening then. So that's why it's crucial to have that second photographer, especially if you did not have a first look, because then your photographer won't have any time to go get guest pictures during cocktail hour. So if guest photos are really important to you, that's where that second shooter really comes in handy, because they're able to capture all of those guests while your main photographer is focusing on posed photos or maybe reception details and then other things that are really important that they can't be in two places at once. So I hope that that really illustrates to you guys the benefits of having a second photographer, where they can be in another place the main photographer can't be in, because the main photographer is focusing on other crucial parts of the day and they can't really be magically in two places at once. So it's really nice to have that second photographer, and just know that if you choose not to have a second photographer, that you might be missing out on some of those things like a lot of guest coverage. Not to say that you won't get any pictures of your guests, you just won't have as many, and you might not get pictures of every single guest, especially if you don't have that many guests. If you've got like 50 guests, maybe you're not going to get them all photographed. If you've got 300 guests, you probably won't get pictures of every single guest, even if you have two photographers. So just know that you're going to be missing out on some things if you don't have a second photographer. Maybe you won't be getting ready photos of the groom if you're a bride and groom, or if you have two brides, maybe they're going to be spread too thin from the main photographer, so you have to pick and choose, or you're just going to have less getting ready photos because they were spread really thin between the two of you. So you just have to know that everything is a balance. So if you choose not to have something, you might be giving up some of those benefits that you might have had you had a second photographer. So it's just good to be educated and know what you're going to be getting or not getting if you choose not to have that second photographer. If you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and comment, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!